So good day and welcome again to Xuviate Business Agility Daily, where we help leaders reimagine how work can flow. This is the third video in our mini-series looking at the power of Kanban metrics. Today, I want to touch on two more graphs that can help us to dig deeper to manage our process: the cycle time Scatterplot and the cycle time Histogram. I will again use Kanban and the source data of the same development team that I used in the previous video, but obviously this works for any Kanban workflow. So this is a typical cycle time scatter plot. Initially it looks quite intimidating, but all that it is, it shows us on the x-axis the date, and then on the y-axis the cycle time in days. So if we're looking at this specific item used 19 days, and if we would have more than one item on this day that used 19 days, it will have a little 5, for example, in this case, in the circle, and it will superimpose them all. One other important thing that I switched on already are the percentile lines. Those are usually at 50, 70, 85, or 95. That is often also used when forecasting how long a typical task would take. If we take a new task in, there's an 85% probability that it will be finished within 15 days and a 95% probability that it is done within 25 days. I won't be looking at all the other controls. You'll have to play with them yourself. But let's now look at some of the patterns we should look out for and we should manage for. The first one is a so-called triangle. You can clearly see that when we zoom in, there is a sort of a triangle where tasks take longer over time. Normally, we will see that at the beginning of a graph or of a process because we loaded it at the beginning and then we work those off at the time. If we see it happening later in the process, that means that we are building a so-called flow debt. And that means that we are often expediting other tasks over those, and we are finishing tasks over time, and they take longer and longer. Another pattern that we are looking out for is clusters of tasks. The one type of cluster would be a line like this, where a lot of tasks have been finished on one day. For a development team, that could just mean that it's a deployment day and a lot has been finished on that day. But there are also other clusters. Here we see a cluster that is quite erratic and where quite a few tasks are actually sitting above the 95th percentile line. That warrants closer inspection. One type that we can help us is highlighting blocked items. Now you would see that anything that was ever blocked has been marked in red. And if we're taking, for example, this item here that is at 58 days, and we're looking a bit closer at it, we can see that it was only actually blocked for about 7 days out of that. But if we're looking closer, we'll see it was in progress for coding for 26 days, but then it waited for testing for 21 days. Now we can look at it closer and it might show a bottleneck somewhere. Now that we looked at clusters and variability in the previous one, we've got the opposite nearly here, where we've got parts of weeks sometimes where there's nothing happening and you need to investigate. In this case, we can clearly see this was over Christmas, so it is expected. But if it doesn't look like that, what is happening there? This would, by the way, coincide with, on your CFD, a flat line. And then there's one more type of graph that I want to look at, and that's the cycle time histogram. It is actually a cycle time scatter plot turned by 90 degrees and then shaken so that all dots fall down. If we look at this same histogram, we now have the cycle time, which was previously the y-axis on the x-axis, and we've got the frequency of work items on this side. And we can clearly see there is about 16% that was done in 1 day or less. There is about 38% that were completed in 4 days or less. And you can again see the 50th, the 75th, the 85th, and the 95th percentile. And we will often see a long tail. Those are the outliers, and we need to look at where those are and how to manage them. Again, we can zoom in here, and I want to show one more point, and that is if we are seeing a pattern like this, where we've got a lot of items on one part, for example, now at 1 day, and a lot of items around the 8-day mark. Often this means that we are working on two types of tasks. In this example, it could be bugs and support issues that we are sorting out in 1 day. And then, as we said, we've got that 7-day deployment cycle. So it might be that we are seeing that then in the 8-day. Regardless, if we see two humps like that, we might want to actually split that somehow and manage it independently. So the actionable tip for today is cycle time scatterplots and cycle time histograms are two very valuable tools to examine your process. Things you would want to look out for in a scatterplot are, for example, a triangle of tasks increasing in cycle time, clusters of tasks, outliers, and general variability, and gaps where no tasks are completed for extended times. Remember again that none of these are inherently bad if there are good reasons for them. A cycle time histogram, on the other hand, helps us to understand the distribution of tasks. And we did look at one more phenomenon. If the histogram shows more than one hump, it often points to different types of tasks or classes of servers, which might need to be managed separately.